If you look strictly at the surface level of the economy right now, everything seems remarkably intact. Equity markets are resilient, unemployment is sitting low, and billions in capital are pouring into a massive AI investment boom. Household financial stress is climbing, hiring is stalling, and interest rates are staying high even as growth indicators slow. Environment. This is the onset of Neo-Stagflation. In macro history, stagflation marks the period where a dying economic order loses its utility before the successor system has fully emerged. As we move into 2027, the pressure reaches the corporate level. The extreme capital expenditure required to build AI infrastructure starts demanding real-world returns. But underlying consumer demand is too weak to support it. Tech valuations disconnect from reality, forcing companies to shrink margins, pull back investments, and initiate massive layoffs. The damage from shrinking profits expands as it meets massive debt loads carried by national governments. Highly indebted economies face a mathematical limit when they attempt to survive prolonged exposure to elevated interest rates. Look at this loop. Governments carrying massive debt force interest rates higher to attract bond buyers. Those high rates crush growth. As growth shrinks, tax revenues fall, forcing governments to borrow more. The US, Southern Europe, and Australia are all caught within this trap. As the pressure builds, asset markets violently divide. Sectors built on cheap debt, like commercial real estate and high-valuation growth stocks, begin to crack. Meanwhile, hard assets like energy, defense industries, and gold hold their ground. The enormous liquidity injections of the early 2020s essentially pulled future economic growth into the present. Now that the future has arrived, the engine is running completely on fumes. By 2029, years of tech investment failures and compounding interest payments on national debt reach a point where growth can no longer cover the system. The debt cycle, the technological transition, and a shift toward a multipolar geopolitical map all reach their terminal points simultaneously, forcing a massive and sudden global repricing. There are three main ways this bottleneck ultimately clears. The first is debt monetization. To save defaulting governments, central banks are forced to step in and print currency to buy the debt. This keeps the state functioning, but entirely at the expense of everyday purchasing power. The second scenario hits the tech sector. If AI fails to deliver fast enough returns, credit markets freeze. A crash in tech valuations collides directly with those vulnerable sovereign debt loads, creating a dual panic across both public and private markets. The third path is an external shock, a severe geopolitical escalation, whether in the Taiwan Strait, the Red Sea, or the Middle East, suddenly severs global supply chains and sends energy prices skyrocketing. We saw the paralysis an energy shock can cause back in 1973, but today's economy is highly financialized and deeply interconnected. A massive global supply chain break now would be vastly more destructive than it was 50 years ago. Whether the final blow comes from debt burdens, a tech collapse, or geopolitical conflict, the outcome is exactly the same. The old global operating system is violently forced into reset. The most immediate casualty of this reset is central bank credibility. For 40 years, the market assumed central banks could always control the economy. Now they are caught in a monetary policy trap, where manipulating interest rates no longer fixes deep structural rot. We also see the formal end of globalization. This means physically bifurcated supply chains, parallel payment networks, and competing AI ecosystems. Doing business across borders permanently costs more. Within borders, society splits sharply. Capital owners gather massive wealth from AI-driven productivity gains, while the labor force absorbs the damage of job displacement and stagnating wages. We are left with a bizarre structural paradox: extreme asset prosperity living right alongside severe permanent household hardship. Financial engineering cannot solve an exhausted growth model. To actually stabilize the system, global debt has to be brought down to reality, likely through a messy combination of heavy restructuring and inflation dilution. But surviving the debt crisis is just step one. A genuine, lasting recovery demands a massive physical revolution in productivity and energy. Artificial intelligence has to break out of the financial stock market bubble. It needs to physically integrate into manufacturing floors, supply chain logistics, and healthcare systems to produce actual, measurable economic output. And that requires power.
Every major economic expansion in history relies entirely on the discovery of cheaper, vastly scalable energy systems. To power the massive data demands of the 2030s, AI must be paired directly with high-output baseline sources, like nuclear power, backed by extreme energy storage and supergrids. The true superpowers of the post-2032 world won't be the nations that manage to temporarily manipulate inflation down a few basis points. The winners will be whoever actually solves the automation and energy equations, pouring the concrete for the next global economy.